2 in the morning, a man walked into the gas station wearing a full astronaut costume, bought a single banana, paid in exact change, and walked back out into the night without saying a single word. And that was somehow only the third strangest thing that happened during my first month on that shift.
I'd taken the overnight gas station job because it was the only shift available that let me attend classes during the day. And I genuinely believed it would just mean quiet hours restocking shelves with almost nobody coming through the door.
My manager walked me through the register system for about 20 minutes on my very first night, then handed me the keys, wished me luck, and left, telling me almost as an afterthought that overnight shifts tended to attract a slightly different crowd than daytime ones.
The first couple hours were exactly as quiet as I'd hoped. Just me, the hum of the refrigerators, and the occasional truck passing on the highway outside. And I remember thinking this job might genuinely be the easiest one I'd ever had. Around midnight, a long-haul trucker came in for coffee and ended up talking to me for almost 45 minutes straight about conspiracy theories involving the highway system. And I learned quickly that overnight customers often just wanted somebody, anybody, to actually listen to them. There was a man who came in almost every single night around 1 in the morning, walked every aisle slowly, and left without ever purchasing a single item. And it took me weeks to realize the store was probably just the only warm, lit place he had access to.
About 2 months in, a man walked in around 3 a.m. with his hand shoved deep in his jacket pocket, demanding I empty the register. And my heart pounded so hard, I genuinely thought he might be able to hear it from across the counter.
Every ounce of training I'd received about situations like this came rushing back at once. Hand over hand and eye contact instead of panic. And I opened that register as calmly as I possibly could, while quietly praying it would be enough to end things peacefully.
He grabbed the cash and left without hurting me, disappearing into the parking lot darkness as quickly as he'd appeared. And I stood frozen behind that counter for a long moment before my hands finally started shaking uncontrollably from everything I'd been holding in. I called the police with a shaking voice, and while I waited for them to arrive, I remember sitting on the floor behind the counter, just trying to breathe normally again, replaying every second of the encounter over and over in my mind.
My manager offered me time off after that, but strangely, staying home alone with my thoughts felt worse than going back. So I returned to that same counter 3 nights later, more alert than I'd ever been, but determined not to let fear push me out. After that night, I started paying much closer attention to who walked through that door, learning to read body language and hand positions in ways I never would have thought about before. And that heightened awareness slowly became second nature over the following weeks. Not every regular was strange in an unsettling way, though. There was a woman who worked night shifts at the hospital nearby who always stopped in for coffee before her shift, and our brief conversations became one of the few genuinely warm parts of those overnight hours. One night, a woman walked in barefoot, ordered $40 of scratch-off lottery tickets, scratched every single one at the counter without saying a word, threw all of them in the trash when none of them won, and left without ever making eye contact. A young woman came in late one night, clearly having just been crying, buying a single pack of tissues and a bottle of water. And something about the exhaustion on her face made me quietly slide a candy bar across the counter and tell her it was on the house. Moments like that taught me that overnight shifts attracted more than just strange behavior. They attracted people at their most vulnerable hours. Insomniacs, night workers, people avoiding difficult situations at home, all passing through that one small lit doorway in the dark. Around 3 in the morning one weekend, a group of 6 clearly intoxicated partygoers stumbled in all at once, everyone talking over each other, one of them attempting to pay for snacks with what turned out to be Monopoly money. And I somehow had to manage the entire chaotic scene alone.
Somehow, I managed to get real payment out of the least intoxicated one in the group, ushered them all back out toward their designated driver waiting outside, and stood there afterward laughing to myself about how none of my training had prepared me for managing drunk customer group dynamics.
There was another regular who came in every single night at exactly the same time, never spoke a single word beyond his order, paid in exact cash every time, and left immediately. And something about his rigid consistency made me quietly worry about him without ever knowing why. By month 5, I developed a whole set of instincts I never knew I needed. Reading tone of voice before someone even reached the counter. Recognizing which regulars needed conversation and which needed to be left completely alone. And I realized I'd become genuinely good at this strange job. One exhausted father came in at 4 a.m. buying formula and diapers, and while I rang him up, he quietly admitted he hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night in weeks. And something about that small confession from a total stranger stayed with me the rest of my shift. I started understanding that being the only lit, open place for miles during those dead hours meant something to people, beyond just convenience. It meant a safe stop, a familiar face, and sometimes the only human interaction they'd have during their hardest stretches. When a nervous new hire started on the overnight shift alongside me, I found myself passing down everything I'd learned. Not just how to run the register, but how to read a room, how to stay calm in scary moments, and how to offer small kindnesses when they mattered most. These days, whenever I pass a gas station glowing alone on some dark, empty street, some part of me still thinks about that job, about the astronaut costume and the crying stranger, and the man with his hand in his jacket, and how all of them somehow shaped who I am now. That overnight gas station job taught me that strangeness and struggle often live right next to each other in the same tired faces passing through at 3 a.m. And learning to meet both with patience instead of judgment changed how I see people everywhere else in my life. If you've ever worked a job that showed you a side of people most folks never see, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and follow along, because every stick has a story, and there's a new one coming every week.